Well, hello, my friends. Welcome to me, your host, Christian Watson. My friends, Congress is an absolute revolt against the Constitution. There's no way to put this, no ands, ifs, and buts about it. And this is perhaps a quite dangerous moment for the preservation and continuation of our great republic. I'll explain what I mean in a second. Before I do, if you like the work I do, or you're intrigued by my statements and my claims and what I'm trying to accomplish here at Christian Watson and Pensive Politics, please consider giving this video a like, please consider subscribing, and please consider commenting. Any little bit helps us move philosophy, pensiveness, and intellectual thought back to the political conversation to drown out the voices that are bringing us down and forgetting the foundations of this nation. Now let's continue. My friends, some of you may be intrigued by what I just said, and some of you may respond, well, Christian, this is nothing new. Of course, nothing new. But every time this happens, it's worth highlighting because it is just a further black eye, a further mark against the core of this nation. You see, my friends, the Constitution by itself alone means nothing. But the Constitution is founded on a higher moral ideal, a higher moral universal order, which is known as natural law. It goes by many names. Natural law is what our founders know it as. It's what Christian Watson knows it as. It's what people who defend the Constitution in truth and reason know it as. And that natural law, combined with the Constitution, provides what is called a constitutional moral ethos. What is the ethos of our Constitution? Where does it get its legitimacy from? And the difference between the Constitution and every other governmental document that came before it is that it puts power and moral authority directly where it belongs, in the hands of the individual. Or rather, it leaves the individual as the focus of moral authority, whereas moral ideas come from outside of the individual. And so, any office within this government that is predicated on the Constitution is therefore obligated not to only follow the letter of the Constitution, but to also follow the constitutional moral ethos. And Congress, with two initiatives that they are pushing through right now, are not only failing to do that, they are trying to actively butcher a constitutional moral ethos rooted in natural law with two salient things. Their push for gun control, which as of the posting of this video just cleared a procedural vote in the Senate, and the January 6th show trials. Both of these events have their own conceptual significance, and I will deal with both of them separately and then tie them back together as I tie up my analysis in a few moments here. So my friends, 10 Republicans and 10 Democrats worked on a framework, as I covered in yesterday's video, which will be in the comment section down below, worked on a legislative framework to respond and address gun violence due to the Uvalde shooting and other shootings as well. And that legislative framework initially included a few things. It included closing the boyfriend loophole, which is basically a loophole that would allow boyfriends who are domestic abusers to get firearms, whereas married people, husbands, couldn't do the same thing. So it's a loophole. It would give brine grants, which is the Brine Act being a public safety act, which gives grants to states to encourage public safety. It would give brine grants, money grants, to states so they could implement red flag laws, and it would also more heavily scrutinize anyone between the ages of 18 to 21 or 18 to 20 who's trying to purchase a firearm. It would also increase school resources, and it would also provide funding for mental health. The text of the bill that was just released not too long ago essentially mirrors a lot of this stuff. There may be one or two differences, but it essentially mirrors a lot of this stuff. And again, Republicans and Democrats both cooperated on it. But my friends, they are justifying this not by any mention of first principles, not by any reference to the constitutional moral order, but rather they are justifying this on consequentialist and utilitarian grounds, saying that common sense legislation was long overdue. But my friends, what is common sense if it itself is not defined well? And what is common sense if it goes against the moral order of this nation? It is not common sense whatsoever. Congress, being a body which has dedicated itself to being a custodian and a protector by oath of the Constitution and therefore its moral ethos, has an interest in ensuring that it remains intact. And yet, ever since the progressive era, it's been chipping away, creating the administrative state and doing so many things that subvert the moral order. And this is one of them. My friends, the Second Amendment is very clear. A well-regulated militia being necessary for a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. The first part of that, talking about the militia, which is what leftists use to say, well-regulated, therefore gun laws. No. That was a political statement to talk about classical republicanism and the debates against monarchy, monarchy being what the United States detached itself from and rebuked with the establishment of this country. And the second part being the acknowledgement of every individual's natural right to defend himself. And this gun law, this new gun law, is going to fund a practice called red flag laws, which abridge one's natural right to defend themselves. I don't care if due process is a part of that equation. Due process by itself does not confer moral validity upon an action. Due process is simply a procedure. It's an important procedure. It's one that can help protect rights. But if due process is being used to violate rights, then it is as useless as anything else in that particular context. But that's the argument. There's due process, therefore red flag laws, or what they would call risk protection orders, which can take away someone's right to own a firearm, are okay. Also, what does it mean exactly? Why should all domestic abusers be treated equally? What if someone was wrongly accused? Or what if someone was a domestic abuser, but they have gone through rehab and things of that sort? Well, what the bill says is that after 5 years, they would be able to get their firearms back. But why 5 years? Why set this arbitrary timestamp of 5 years to restore someone's right to them? Here's the point. If someone is convicted of a serious crime like domestic abuse, you punish that crime, you punish them, and you punish them for what they did, but you don't try to tape down on their rights, which again are inviolable and cannot be infringed. Even bad people have the moral right to preserve their life. Even bad people do. But if they do bad things, you punish them for the bad things. You do not punish their inalienable right to defend themselves. And yet, Congress is doing this. But the passage of this legislation, and any politician who inhabits the United States Senate, who inhabits the House of Representatives, who voted for this, any Republican or Democrat, is forsaking their sacred duty to preserve the constitutional ethos of this country, and therefore has delegitimized themselves in their capacity as a legislator. And this is what Congress does, and this is the danger of what Congress does. Going all the way back to the Patriot Act and even things before the Patriot Act, this is the danger. When Congress blows up the foundations and the guardrails upon what it is supposed to operate in, and then decides to recreate those guardrails in their image with little reference to the deontological rights and enshrine the Constitution, and more reference towards consequentialism and utilitarianism, two ethical theories that are absolutely anathema to the foundations of this country. What happens? This kind of stuff happens. You begin to rationalize rights. Rights become conditional and negotiable. They are no longer inalienable. Congress is in revolt against the Constitution. January 6th. Okay, I've not watched all the hearings. I watched the entire first night hearing. And that was all about I need to know. I have two objections against the January 6 hearings. Number one, they are founded on corrupt principles. And number two, they do not have they are not epistemically pure. So here's what I mean. On count one, the chairman of the January 6 committee said that throughout the investigation, it was either the chairman or Liz Cheney, one of them said, Throughout their period of investigation, they're going to find new information and they're going to find new evidence to bring for the American people. So the implication is that the January 6th committee did not do all of this, did not do as much fact-finding and research as they should have done to give the American people a true account of what happened that day, but rather is going to continue doing their searching in the midst of the public where people's reputations and their character can be slandered before things are even rigorously assessed, before claims are even rigorously assessed. And we've already seen the consequences of this. We've already seen the committee cherry-picking small points within that entire day and trying to paint the entire event as insurrectionary in nature, whereas many people who went to the Capitol even weren't even being violent, they were merely trespassing, and there was even an admission from the Justice Department that they're overcharging people, and there was even an admission from federal judges that people were being overcharged simply for being in proximity to the chaos, and yet the committee, being founded on the corrupt principle of selection bias, wanting to simply get information that confirms their preconception to indict Trump with this sort of moral indictment, they are bound by that, and it inhibits them from being able to see that event for what it truly is in all of its guts, glory, and glamour and lack thereof. I'm not saying that the entire event was peaceful. Obviously, there were backers on January 6th that did some bad things. But there were also good people who were simply exercising their ability to express themselves, and at the very worst, some of them trespassed, and they are being branded as terrorists and insurrectionists for simply trespassing in a building that was meant to be established to protect their inalienable rights. How contradictory, how paradoxical is that, and how insulting is it for a committee which is established in a body meant to also preserve those very rights to besmirch them by not giving the full story and by simply trying to use selection bias and confirmation bias to indict one of their political opponents. How dare they use the energy and the power of an institution built upon first principles, built upon constitutional ethos, to do something that is completely and utterly contrary to it. That's the first objection. The second objection is the fact that, again, the January 6th committee has gone beyond the day of January 6th, and they are more concerned about President Trump's theories about the election. Regardless of what you believe about President Trump's theories about the election, they are trying to link, the January 6th committee is trying to link President Trump's theories about the election to violent insurrection or to some of the violent events that happened on January 6th. And this comes down to understanding moral relationships, the relationship between words and action. If I tell someone to go to somewhere and I tell them to go blow up the place or to attack the place, that is an incitement. But if I don't say that, but my actions move them to do that, am I therefore responsible? I cannot be responsible under any principle of natural justice because I don't have any control over what someone does. I only have control over what leaves my mouth and what I do. And if I didn't even give a single indication that I wanted them to go ahead and do something violent, and they decided to take my words and reinterpret them, they are no longer operating within the reality and confines of my words. They are operating within the reality and confines of their interpretation and their mind, which have nothing to do with me. And since justice is that principle which relates to interpersonal relationships, and the person, me, is being removed from the equation, and someone is just using their delusions to run over in their head, they are the ones who need to be indicted, not me. This is what's happening to President Trump right now. President Trump never once said, go ahead and be violent. There were delusional people, some of whom, by the way, were infiltrated by law enforcement. We'll talk about that. But there were delusional people that decided to go ahead and storm the Capitol, and they said, well, President Trump made us do it. No, he didn't. You took something that he said, took it out of context, and you removed the interpersonal relationship which justice requires, and you then left yourself in that context and went ahead and pursued your delusions on your quixotic quest to do absolutely nothing at all. And yet, this proximity ethics, which is the action of trying to say something is good or bad on the basis of what it looks like, not on the basis of the actual facts and concrete reality of the thing. That is what this January 6th committee is using to attack President Trump. But this is not about President Trump. I'm not a Trump apologist. This is about the truth. The constitutional moral ethos, tying it back to that, is built within the idea of natural law. Natural law is built within the understanding of observable reality being resolute and the limitations that reality gives us as being important to developing ethical modes of being, to developing a good and responsible life, to developing ethics within civil society. In the January 6th committee, by using confirmation bias, selection bias, and not recognizing proper moral relationships and moral terms such as justice and proper justice, is completely and utterly throwing out the rules of reality that is necessary for ethical thinking. And they are therefore trying to subvert the constitutional moral ethos. My friends, Congress is revolting against the Constitution. This is Congress versus the Constitution. This is Congress against the Constitution. This is Congress against sound principles. This is Congress against the legitimacy of their powers. This is Congress working in a political world, not the actual world. This is Congress fighting and cannibalizing the very grounds upon which their house sits. It is the equivalent, the metaphorical equivalent to trying to divert a river into an area, into a reservoir so you can control it. But the problem is you can't hold the river forever because the river's waters will keep coursing. Why do you think dams break? Because at some point the dam is at full capacity and it shatters. You can't control and subvert the truth. You can try to manipulate it, you can try to distort it, but you can't control and distort it because guess what? The moment you try to do that, is the moment you are inevitably setting yourself up for failure. That's simply how things go. And so if it's Congress, my friends, versus the Constitution, you have to ask yourself, what side are you on? I know what side I'm on. I know what I'm going to evangelize and what I'm going to talk about on this channel. I know what I'm going to fight for. But we have two salient events that show just how troubling the events happening in our country are. What will you say? What side are you on? Beyond the side of truth, beyond the side of America's foundational principles, because they are too precious to allow to fall by the wayside. Think on it. My friends, again, if you love me, be sure to like this video, subscribe to this channel, share this video, comment on this video. This message, my friend, is dynamite. Please be sure to interact with me. Come on my Discord, come to my locals, which is going to be christianwatson.locals.com. My guys, I love you guys so much, and please stay pensive. I got to go calm down after this. Bye, guys.